When Ruto placed the small, neatly wrapped gift in front of her father, the entire table went silent. Her stepmother smirked. Her father looked confused. "You didn't have to get me anything," he said, his voice calm but cold. Ruto smiled faintly. "Oh, I did. It's something you've been avoiding for years." He tore open the wrapping, and his expression froze. Everyone stared, waiting. Inside the box was a set of documents, folded neatly, with her father's name on them. "What is this?" he whispered. Ruto leaned closer. "A reminder that when you erased me from your will, I didn't disappear. I built something you can never take back." No one at that table spoke again. And that's how the truth began to unravel. Right there, under the Christmas lights. Ruto was once the center of her father's world. He used to tell everyone that she was his biggest blessing, the one thing that kept him strong after her mother passed away. But everything changed when Tari came into their lives. Tari was charming at first, pretending to care about Ruto. She would smile sweetly when her father was around, but behind his back, she whispered things that slowly poisoned his heart. She told him Ruto had become proud, that she didn't respect him anymore, that she thought she was better than everyone because of her career. At first, Ruto didn't notice how deep the damage was. She thought maybe her father was just grieving in his own way. But soon his words became sharper. He started calling her ungrateful, saying she only visited out of duty, not love. It hurt her deeply, yet she still kept coming home. Every time she brought gifts, cooked his favorite meals, or tried to talk, Tari would find a way to twist things. If Ruto laughed too loudly, she was being disrespectful. If she stayed quiet, she was being cold. Ruto tried to ignore the tension and focus on her work. As an interior designer, she poured her heart into every project. Her name was slowly becoming known in Lusaka, and she had built a life she was proud of. But no success could fill the emptiness she felt when her father looked at her like a stranger. Still, she told herself that love was worth fighting for. This Christmas, she decided to go home again, hoping maybe things would finally be different. She picked thoughtful gifts for everyone, a soft shawl for Tari, a new wristwatch for her father. On the drive home, she rehearsed what she would say, how she would keep the peace. She told herself, "Don't argue, just smile." She wanted to believe that this Christmas would heal what years had broken. But when she arrived, she felt something strange in the air. The house that once smelled like her mother's perfume now felt cold and unfamiliar. Her father barely greeted her, and Tari's smile looked more like a warning. Still, Ruto sat down at the dinner table, trying to ignore the tension. Then, in the middle of the laughter and music, her father cleared his throat and said the words that froze her heart. "I've updated my will," he said, raising his glass. "Ruto won't be part of it anymore." In that moment, Ruto realized she hadn't lost her father that night. She had lost him years ago. That evening, the house was bright with lights and soft music played in the background. The table was full of delicious food, roasted goat meat, vegetables, rice, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Everyone seemed happy, laughing and talking as if everything was perfect. But when Ruto stepped in with her gifts, she felt something strange, like the warmth in the room wasn't real. Her stepmother, Tari, came forward to greet her with a fake smile, and her father gave her a short nod, barely meeting her eyes. Ruto tried to push away the uneasy feeling. She handed out her gifts one by one, carefully chosen for each person. For Tari, she brought a soft shawl in her favorite color. For her father, a fine wristwatch she had saved up for weeks to buy. Everyone thanked her politely, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. It felt more like a performance than a family gathering. Ruto sat quietly, reminding herself to stay calm, to not let anything ruin the evening. Dinner began. The sound of plates clinking and people chatting filled the air. Tari kept talking loudly about her son's achievements, how one just got promoted, how the other was planning to buy a new car. Her father nodded proudly at every word. Ruto sat there, listening, trying to stay invisible. Every time she tried to join the conversation, Tari quickly changed the topic. Ruto noticed, but she didn't show it. She just smiled politely, even though her chest ached. As the meal went on, her father seemed unusually cheerful. He kept making small speeches, laughing more than usual. Ruto thought maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would finally be peaceful. But then, halfway through dinner, her father cleared his throat. He raised his glass and smiled at everyone. I've made some updates to my estate planning, he said proudly. And since Rudo has her own life now, I've decided she won't be part of the will anymore. The entire room went silent. The laughter, the music, even the sound of spoons stopped. Rudo froze. She wasn't sure if she heard him right. Tari tried to hide a satisfied smile, pretending to look shocked. The rest of the family looked at Rudo, waiting to see her reaction, waiting for her to cry, argue, or beg. But Rudo didn't do any of that. She sat straight, her face calm and her eyes steady. Inside, her heart was breaking, but she refused to let anyone see it. Slowly, she put down her fork and dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin. Then she looked at her father and said softly, "I understand." Everyone stared at her, confused. Tari looked almost annoyed that Rudo wasn't reacting the way she wanted. But Rudo stayed composed. She even smiled. A small, quiet smile that no one could read. She knew something they didn't. Something that would soon change. Everything. Rudo sat still for a few moments after hearing her father's words. Everyone around the table kept watching her, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. Her heart was heavy, but her face showed no sign of pain. Slowly, she placed her fork down, wiped her hands with the napkin, and looked at her father. He avoided her eyes, pretending to be busy with his drink. Tari leaned back in her chair, pretending to look relaxed, but there was a small, satisfied smile on her face. Rudo took a deep breath. She could feel her pulse racing, but her voice came out calm and clear. "Before I go," she said softly, reaching into her handbag, "I'd like you to have this." Everyone turned to look as she pulled out a small red box tied neatly with a golden ribbon. She pushed it gently toward her father. The whole table went silent again. Tari gave a short laugh and shook her head. "Always so dramatic," she whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. But Rudo didn't even glance at her. Her eyes were fixed on her father, calm and steady. There was something about her expression that made everyone uneasy. She didn't look angry or sad. She looked certain, like someone who already knew how this story would end. Her father stared at the box for a few seconds, unsure what to do. "You didn't have to get me anything," he said, trying to sound casual. Rudo smiled faintly. "Oh, I did," she replied. "It's something you've been avoiding for years." The air in the room felt heavy. Tari frowned, now watching more carefully. Rudo leaned back in her chair and folded her hands, as if waiting for him to open it. Her father looked from the box to her, confused. He hesitated, then said, "Rudo, I don't know what you're trying to prove." Rudo's tone stayed gentle. "I'm not trying to prove anything, father. I just wanted to give you something before I leave." Tari rolled her eyes. "Here we go again," she muttered under her breath. But no one laughed this time. Something about Rudo's calmness unsettled everyone. Even the air felt different, colder somehow. Her father finally picked up the box, but didn't open it yet. He just looked at it, then at her face. And for the first time that night, he noticed how composed she was. No cheers, no playagem, no anger. Just quiet confidence. Rudo stood up slowly. "Enjoy your dinner," she said softly, her eyes meeting his one last time. "I'll be on my way soon." And as she turned to walk toward the door, everyone felt a strange chill, as if the real story was only just beginning. That a few days before Christmas, Rudo's world had quietly changed. She wasn't even supposed to know. She was visiting a friend, Nyasha, who worked as a junior assistant at her father's lawyer's office. They were just catching up over lunch when Nyasha looked uneasy, as if something was on her mind. After a few moments of hesitation, she finally said, "Rudo, please don't tell anyone I said this, but I saw your father's new will." Rudo laughed at first, thinking it was some misunderstanding. But Nyasha's serious face stopped her. "Your name isn't there anymore," she said softly. "It's just Tari's sons now." For a long moment, Rudo couldn't speak. Her heart started to race, but she tried to stay calm. "There must be some mistake," she said. "My father would never do that." But deep down, a small voice inside her whispered that it might be true. Nyasha told her that Tari had been visiting the lawyer's office several times over the past months, always bringing small gifts, always asking questions about the estate. She had made sure everything was in her favor, and Rudo's father had quietly agreed. When Rudo left the restaurant that day, her legs felt weak. The world around her seemed blurry, as if she was walking through a bad dream. She sat in her car for nearly an hour, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how her father could erase her so easily. It wasn't about the money. Ruto had built her own life, her own success. But she could not understand why the man who raised her, the man who once tucked her into bed and called her my heartbeat, could let her disappear from his plans without a single word. She remembered how, after her mother's death, her father used to hold her close and promise, "You'll always have a place here no matter what." That sentence had carried her through her toughest years. And now it meant nothing. Tari had won. The woman who smiled sweetly in front of everyone had slowly pushed her out, piece by piece, until there was no room left for her at all. Ruto cried that night, quietly, where no one could see her. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to understand how love could change so completely. After hours of silence, something inside her shifted. She wiped her tears and whispered to herself, "If they want me gone, let them see who I become without them." She decided not to confront her father right away. Instead, she prepared in silence. She gathered documents, made calls, and set her plans in motion. She would still go to the Christmas dinner, but not as the weak daughter they thought they could erase. She would go as someone they never truly knew, calm, steady, and ready to reveal the truth they thought she'd never find out. That Ruto's father stared at the small red box in front of him, unsure whether to open it or not. The whole family watched in silence. Tari crossed her arms, pretending not to care, but her eyes were fixed on the box. Finally, after a long pause, her father sighed and untied the ribbon. He opened it slowly, expecting maybe a letter or some emotional gift meant to make him feel guilty. But when he saw what was inside, his eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Inside was a bundle of neatly folded documents, sealed and stamped. On top of them was a logo, House of Ruto, her company's name. Her father looked up at her, puzzled. "What's this supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice sharp with irritation. Ruto didn't flinch. She met his eyes calmly. "It's the deed to this house," she said quietly. "I bought it 2 months ago." For a few seconds, no one spoke. Tari blinked rapidly, her smile fading. Her father frowned and shook his head. "That's impossible," he said. "This house belongs to me." Ruto tilted her head slightly. "Not anymore," she replied. "When you removed me from your will, you also sold this property to a development firm to cover your debts. The firm didn't tell you who the final buyer was. It was me." The room went completely silent. Even the air felt heavy. Tari's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her father looked down at the papers again, flipping through them as if trying to find a mistake. Every page had legal seals, signatures, and dates. All official, all real. His own name appeared as the seller, and Ruto's name stood bold as the owner. You bought my house?" he finally managed to say, his voice cracking with disbelief. Ruto's tone stayed calm, her face unreadable. "No, father. I bought my childhood home. The one you were willing to give away to strangers." Tari stood up suddenly, her face pale. "You planned this," she hissed. "You wanted to embarrass us." Ruto looked at her, her expression steady. "No, Daddy. I wanted to remind my father that removing me from his will doesn't erase me from existence." Her father's hands trembled slightly as he set the documents down. The pride in his eyes was gone, replaced by shame and confusion. He had thought he was in control, that he could shape the future as he pleased. But his daughter, the one he had called ungrateful, had quietly saved the very house he risked losing. For the first time, Tari had nothing to say. The entire room felt frozen, no one daring to speak. Ruto stood up, smoothing her dress. "I don't want your money, father," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know that while you were erasing me from your will, I was protecting what you were too blind to see." Then she looked at him one last time and added, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm done trying to prove my worth. Enjoy your dinner, in my home." For a few seconds, no one could breathe. Her father just stared at the papers in front of him, reading the same line over and over, hoping it wasn't real. His fingers trembled as he turned each page, his face growing paler with every word. Tari leaned closer, trying to grab the documents, but Ruto calmly pulled them back. Her father's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The proud man who always controlled every conversation suddenly had nothing to say. Ruto stood quietly, her eyes steady on him. She didn't look angry or proud, just calm, like someone who had finally made peace with the truth. Her father looked up at her, confusion and fear mixing in his eyes. "You're saying this house belongs to you now?" he whispered. Rudo nodded slowly. "Yes, father. Every wall, every chair, every memory. You sold it to pay your debts. The company that bought it was mine. So technically," she paused for a moment, her voice firm but soft, "you're sitting in my living room." The silence that followed felt heavy. Tari gasped, covering her mouth, realizing that her years of quiet manipulation had led them into their own trap. All the lies she had fed her husband, about Rudo being selfish, disrespectful, and unworthy, had come back to destroy her perfect plan. Rudo didn't raise her voice. She didn't look for revenge in her words. She simply stood with quiet power that filled the room more than any shouting ever could. "You wanted me out of your story," she said slowly, looking straight at her father. "But you're living in mine." Her father's eyes lowered, shame creeping into his expression. The weight of what he had done, how easily he let Tari turn his heart against his only child, finally hit him. Tari, desperate, began to speak, her words coming out fast and shaky. "You think this makes you better than us? You think you can just come here and—" Rudo raised a hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "Tari, I don't need to prove anything," she said quietly. "You both already showed me who you are." She turned toward the door, picking up her purse from the chair. "Finish your meal," she said softly, glancing once more at her father. "Just lock up when you leave." No one moved. Tari's face turned red with anger as she shouted after her. "You'll regret this, Rudo. You'll regret everything." But Rudo didn't stop. She didn't turn back this time, not even for a second. She walked out into the cool night, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders with every step. For the first time in years, she wasn't walking away in pain. She was walking away in peace. Behind her, the only sound left was the silence of people realizing they had lost the one person who still cared. The days after that dinner were quiet, but the silence didn't last long. News of what happened spread quickly through the family and the neighborhood. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some people said Rudo had gone too far, that she humiliated her father on Christmas. Others said she had done the right thing, that she had finally stood up for herself after years of being mistreated. Everywhere Rudo went, she could feel the whispers following her, but she stayed calm. She didn't try to explain herself. She knew the truth would speak for her in time. Her father, on the other hand, didn't call or send a single message. He was too proud, too hurt, and too ashamed to face what had happened. He told people he didn't care, that he didn't need Rudo's money or help. Tari, angry and humiliated, continued to speak badly about her, saying Rudo had planned everything to embarrass them. But deep inside, Tari knew she was the reason things had fallen apart. She was the one who had turned a loving father into a stranger to his own child. Months went by. Rudo kept living her life quietly. Her business grew stronger, her clients increased, and her reputation as one of the best interior designers in Lusaka continued to rise. She didn't celebrate or post about what had happened. She focused on her peace, her work, and her small circle of loyal friends who truly cared about her. Still, sometimes at night, she thought about her father and wondered if he was okay. No matter what he had done, she still loved him. She just couldn't keep allowing him to hurt her. Then one morning, everything changed again. Her father started receiving visits from debt collectors. The businesses he had trusted had failed, and the money Tari's sons had promised to invest was gone. The house he thought was his, the one Rudo now owned, was the only safe property left in his name. He had nothing else. That was when the truth finally hit him hard. He sat alone one night, staring at the documents Rudo had left behind at the Christmas dinner. For the first time, he realized what she had done. She hadn't bought the house to take revenge. She had bought it to save him. If she hadn't quietly stepped in, he would have lost everything. The daughter he erased from his will was the one who had protected his home, when no one else did. He felt a heavy ache in his chest as he remembered all the things he had said to her. The cruel words, the cold glances, the years of distance. He wanted to call her, but his pride still held him back. All he could do was whisper to himself, "She didn't ruin me, she saved me." And for the first time, he realized what true love looked like. Silent, patient, and unconditional. On the morning of her father's 60th birthday, he woke up to a quiet house. The celebration he once imagined, filled with laughter, family, and pride, never happened. Tari had grown distant, her guilt too heavy to hide, and most relatives no longer came around. As he sat alone at the dining table, staring at the half-eaten breakfast, a knock came at the door. It was a courier holding a brown envelope and a small box with Rudo's company logo on the seal. The old man's hands trembled as he took them. He opened the envelope first. Inside was a simple letter written in Rudo's calm handwriting. His heart beat faster as he began to read. Dear Father, you once gave me a home when I had nothing. When I was a scared little girl who believed you could fix anything. I grew up watching you work hard for us, even when things were difficult. I may never understand why things changed between us, but I've made peace with it. I didn't buy your house to take revenge. I bought it because I didn't want to see you lose the place you built with your own hands. Today, I'm giving you something small but meaningful, a new beginning. He put the letter down, blinking through the blur in his eyes. His fingers slowly opened the small box, and inside lay a shiny silver key. A tag was attached to it, engraved with an address. It was a modest little house on the outskirts of the city, one that Rudo had quietly bought in his name. For a long moment, he just sat there staring at the key. His chest felt tight. No one had ever made him feel so small yet so loved at the same time. Rudo had every reason to hate him, to let him fall into the same emptiness he had thrown her into. But instead, she gave him another home, just like he once gave her when she was a child. He leaned back in his chair and let the tears fall freely. His pride, his anger, his excuses, none of it made sense anymore. All he could think about was his daughter's face, her calm voice at that dinner table, and her quiet strength. Later that evening, Tari came home to find him holding the letter close to his chest. When she asked what it was, he simply said, "It's forgiveness, something you and I never learned to give." Tari's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't stay any longer. The guilt she had buried deep inside became too heavy to carry. That night, she packed her things and left, unable to face the kindness she had tried so hard to destroy. And as her father sat alone, the silver key shining softly beside him, he whispered, "She gave me back more than a house. She gave me back my heart." Months had passed since Rudo sent the letter and the key. Life had moved on quietly, but something inside her still felt unfinished. One calm afternoon, she decided to visit her father's new home, the small house she had bought for him. It wasn't grand or fancy like the old one, but it had a peaceful charm. The front yard had tiny flowers growing by the gate, and the sound of birds filled the air. As she walked toward the door, her heart beat faster. She didn't know what kind of welcome she would get, or if he would even open the door. When she knocked softly, the door opened after a moment. Her father stood there, thinner, slower, and older than she remembered. His eyes widened when he saw her, and for a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, weakly but genuinely. "Rudo," he said, his voice trembling. She nodded and smiled back. He led her inside. The house was simple, just a wooden table, a few chairs, and a photo of their family on the wall. It looked nothing like the big mansion they once lived in, but it felt warmer. Rudo could tell that he had learned to live with less and appreciate more. They sat together quietly for a while, sipping tea. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It felt peaceful, like both of them finally understood what words could never say. After a few minutes, her father spoke, his voice breaking slightly. "You gave me more than money, Rudo. You gave me a lesson I'll never forget." His eyes were wet, filled with guilt and gratitude. "I was blinded by pride and lies. I forgot what truly mattered. You didn't just buy me a house, you gave me back my dignity." Rudo looked at him softly and replied, "All I ever wanted was honesty, Dad. Not inheritance. Just truth." Her words were gentle but deep, and for the first time in years, he truly listened. He nodded slowly, as if her forgiveness had finally lifted a weight off his shoulders. They didn't hug or cry loudly. They didn't need to. Instead, they stepped outside and sat on the small porch together, watching the sun slowly set behind the trees. The orange sky stretched wide above them, calm and beautiful. For a long moment, they said nothing, and that silence spoke more than any apology could. Her father leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. "You grew stronger than I ever imagined," he said quietly. Rudo smiled too. "Maybe I had to," she replied. As the sky turned golden, Rudo rested her hands on her lap and closed her eyes, feeling the soft wind brush her face. In that moment, there were no old wounds, no bitterness, just peace. After everything that had been broken, they had finally found their way back to understanding. Years later, the world around Ruto had changed in beautiful ways. Her life was no longer defined by pain, betrayal, or the weight of her family's choices. She had built something new, something made of love, purpose, and peace. On a bright Christmas evening, her apartment was filled with laughter, the smell of food, and soft music playing in the background. Around the large wooden table sat her closest friends, her business partners, and a few young designers she had mentored over the years. They called her Mama Ruto, not because of her age, but because of the warmth and guidance she gave. Her company, House of Ruto, had grown into one of the most respected interior design firms in Lusaka. But what made it special wasn't just the success, it was the heart behind it. Ruto made sure her employees were treated like family, with fairness and kindness. She supported orphanages, sponsored art programs, and gave scholarships to young women who couldn't afford education. Every project carried her belief that beauty should heal, not hurt. That evening, as everyone gathered around the Christmas table, Ruto looked at each face, her chosen family, and felt something deep. Inside her chest, peace. No bitterness, no anger, just gratitude for how far she had come. She picked up her glass and stood up, smiling softly. The room grew quiet as she spoke. Family isn't written in wills, she said, her voice gentle but strong. It's built in the way we love each other, without conditions. The people around her nodded, their eyes glistening with emotion. Some of them had their own painful pasts, and her words touched them deeply. They raised their glasses with her, repeating softly, "To love without conditions." The moment was warm, honest, and full of the kind of connection she had always dreamed of. As laughter returned and the sound of clinking glasses filled the air, Ruto's gaze drifted to the wall behind her. Hanging there was a framed photo of her late mother, smiling brightly, as if watching over her. Ruto's eyes softened. She took a slow breath and whispered quietly, "You'd be proud, Mama. I didn't let them turn my heart cold." The world outside glowed with Christmas lights, but inside, the real light came from the peace she carried within. She had lost a family by blood but gained a family by choice, one built on respect, honesty, and love. As the night went on, Ruto leaned back in her chair, her heart calm and steady. Everything she had been through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the lessons, had led her to this moment. And in that warm, golden glow, one truth stood clear in her heart. The greatest inheritance isn't wealth or land, it's peace.